few words of introduction about Jinpa La, who we're just so excited that you're here to kick this off with us and to have a conversation about compassion during this time. And, you know, Jinpa La was trained at the Gandhin Monastic University in South India, where he received the Geshe Laram degree. He also holds a BA in philosophy and a PhD in religious studies, both from Cambridge University. Jinpa has been the principal English translator to His Holiness the Dalai Lama since 1985, and has translated and collaborated on numerous books by the Dalai Lama, including New York Times bestseller, Ethics for the New Millennium and the Art of Happiness, as well as Beyond Religion, Ethics for a Whole World. His own publications include A Fearless Heart, How the Courage to be Compassionate Can Transform Our Lives, and translations of major Tibetan works featured in the Library of Tibetan Classics series. Jinpa is the main author of Compassion Cultivation Training, developed for Stanford University in 2009. He's a frequent speaker at various international conferences on mindfulness, compassion, and contemplative practices, and serves as an adjunct professor at the Faculty of Religious Studies at McGill University in Montreal. And he's the founder and president of the Institute of Tibetan Classics. He's been a core member of the Mind and Life Institute and is chairman of the board since January 2012. Oh my goodness. Jinpa La I'm sure I left many things out, but is there anything you want to add?
No, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you. Thank you for joining us for this conversation. It's just filling my heart even just to see you smiling on the other side of the world there on your screen. So
thank you for inviting me. And
yeah.
Really kind of, in this time of, physical isolation, I think we need to make conscious effort to remind people that it is physical isolation, but not losing social connection. So I think this kind of, getting together is really, and this is one way in which, our technology really helps us.
Yeah.
Thank
yeah.
you.
And,
Definitely.
I wanted to ask you, about that, about what we're creating together. And, many people have said that this pandemic is like the ultimate reset button, this big pause button that we're hitting collectively. I'm curious from the Buddhist perspective, is that a manifestation of our collective karma? And what we're doing as we even connect on Zoom, is that also a manifestation of our karma? How does that work?
It's very difficult to really attribute any event like this to karma. The fact that we are experiencing this globally, I mean, normally when crises happen, it tend to be, in this part of the world, or that part of the world, or, and one interesting difference between natural disasters and pandemics is that natural disasters bring people together, the communities, and generally they tend to be localized. But pandemic, particularly a global one, it's not only separates people, but also it happens everywhere at pretty much at the same time. So in that sense, one could, from the Buddhist point of view, say that there is a collective karma of entire humanity that we have to go through, we're experiencing through. But at the same time, it's very difficult to, I mean, the concept of karma can be problematic, okay? Generally, the theory of karma helps for believers who, when we are suffering, we want to find a meaning. Why are we suffering? We want to find some meaning in experience of suffering. That is very universal. So concept of karma helps in that domain. But generally, concept of karma is better if we look at it from the point of view of future. Our future fate is in our hand. So they're taking responsibility for the future of humanity. And in that sense, invoking the concept of karma is helpful. But if you invoke the concept of karma to explain what is happening now and what has happened before, then there could be a potential misunderstanding and taking it as a kind of a fatalism. So in these kind of situations, it's tricky to invoke karma. But the fact is, this is a global experience. No one is exception. No part of the world is exception. Is exempt from this. So in that sense, one could speak in terms of, collective karma of humanity.
I love that distinction you just made because that completely makes sense. So thank you for that. That really resonated. Jinpa, how can we shift our minds from anger, frustration, loss, and grief to gratitude and positivity?
I think, I mean, it's very natural for humans when we are confronted with something that is completely unexpected, something that strikes us as shock, something that really shakes us. Initially, we tend to react with shock, then fear and anxiety. And then hopefully, if it is a natural process, we will have a grieving period so that a grief becomes a predominant kind of response. And then finally, some kind of, if we move in the more positive directions, then we tend to look for what can we learn from this? So this is where the idea of reset is a powerful one. You know, we would want to make sure that our crisis experience of the crisis and this pandemic is not meaningless. That we can, even if there is no meaning in an inherent, intrinsic sense, we can extract meaning from this because it is a crisis. It is a total shakeup to the system. This tiny virus that is invisible to the naked human eye has really brought human beings to our knees. So I mean, this is, if nothing else, we should learn an important lesson on humanity because as a species, we humans have been very, very arrogant. The hubris of human among the species. We don't look at our species in relation to other species. We tend to have this very anthropocentric view of the world and reality. The world and reality, we see it as a human world and human reality. So if nothing else, this in a crisis should really teach us a lesson on humility. So I think, it is very difficult at this point to ask people to why, because at the moment still we are dealing with the crisis. In many places we still haven't reached the peak of the epidemic itself before even going down. So at this moment the focus should really be, most of us should be on helping the people who are in the front lines, encouraging them, expressing our gratitude, and on our part as individuals, not to unwittingly contribute to the further spread by, that's why in the importance of social distancing is crucial. This is one way in which we as individual citizens can contribute to the slowing down of the virus. And then hopefully, I don't think now is the right time. Hopefully, as the curve goes down, then, as a society, I hope, and a group like this, and people who have the ability, because a lot of millions of people will be struggling simply to survive. But those who are more fortunate like us, who can work from home, whose job doesn't depend on daily wages or, work that is out there in working outside, then hopefully a lot of us will be able to start a conversation. What can we learn from this? Because one of the things that pandemics has really revealed is the fault lines in the societies, and nation to nation it differs. And one thing that really powerfully demonstrated is how the anomaly of the United States as a affluent Western nation with no universal access to healthcare, that is a major hole that has been revealed by this crisis. And also the fact that there is an unresolved issue of millions of undocumented, people. And these are going on for decades.
Yeah.
And this ball has been kicked from one administration to another and has been left unresolved as if you don't think about it, it's not their kind of attitude. But in a situation of pandemics, you cannot discriminate between citizens and undocumented. Pandemics doesn't care. So these are, very important structural issues, even in a developed nation like United States. And then in Canada and elsewhere, we also know, for example, like many of the elderly people's home, which require assisted living and medical care, they have been cut down on the federal spending and provincial spending to the point where some of these businesses have been, commercialized. And then you have these, uh, assistants who are working there are paid minimum salaries, no guarantee, only on a temporary basis. When something like this happens, 50–60% of these employees leave because there's no loyalty. And why would you want to risk your life for a job where there's no guarantee, there's no safety net? And now we have majority of these cases. There was a huge crisis recently in the Montreal area. There was an elderly people's home. There were 30-something, elderly people dying. And then there were, elderly, citizens left with, no care for days.
Yeah.
Fallen down. These are major structural faults because we keep cutting. And now this pandemic has completely revealed these fault lines. And I hope, if nothing else, these fault lines need to be addressed. And that's one way in which we can learn something from this experience.
These are definitely societal fault lines, and we're seeing the impact of major systemic issues over time now come to a head. But how do you think each of us as individuals can find it in ourselves to be of service and to find peace? Because I think when you have that, you are wanting to give to others. It starts with you, though. If you internally have internal conflict, are being run by ego, it's all about power struggles, you're not necessarily going to extend that to the you're going to extend that to the world, and that's where the systems begin as well.
Sure. I mean, it's one thing that hopefully this experience has done is made all of us at least be more empathetic towards others. Because when we are afraid, we know everybody's afraid, okay? Everybody's anxious. Everybody's worried about what this is going to mean economically, what is going to happen to jobs, what is going to happen to our, retirement savings, social security safety nets, and all of this. So this is a universal experience of fear and anxiety. And, if nothing else, I think our capacity for empathy has really should be enhanced. So that's one way. And then secondly, because of the forced, prolonged physical isolation, we are beginning to recognize what matters to us most is our connection with others, is our love and relationship with our loved ones. We now crave them. Those of us, I'm very lucky because I'm living with my wife in this quarantine period, but there are a lot of people who are living alone. And individuals, after a certain point, if you don't have physical contact with another human being, that is really tough. So we are now recognizing the importance of human connection, human relationship, social interactions, and so on. So I think these are, and that way we will we will begin to recognize individually why compassion is so crucial. And then second thing is, because of the prolonged social isolation, we will learn, most of us, some basic skills to calm ourselves down. Some self-regulation techniques, the techniques of, whatever you may want to call it, meditation or whatever. I think people are beginning to learn some ability to apply their mind and calm themselves. Those are really going to be important. But the point about the societal structures is that those need to be introduced top-down. Because individual bottom-up, for example, the movements of mindfulness, movements of compassion training, all of these are beautiful and powerful, but they're all bottom-up. It's voluntary, self-selection, it's wonderful. There will be a critical mass. But if we are really going to change the society, there has to be a structural change, and that has to come from top-down, systemic. And that systemic change can only take place if there's enough voice from everywhere, from the bottom up, expressing and articulating those aspirations.
Yeah, and voting in the right people. We have some questions. Andrea asks, how is your daily practice?
So maybe let's unmute Andrea and let her.
Oh yeah, where is she? Do you want to ask, since this is why we're live and interactive instead of being on like Instagram Live or Facebook Live?
Yeah, so we'll unmute Andrea from Colombia.
Andrea. Oh yeah.
Go ahead, Andre.
I don't find myself in the screen. I don't know what happened.
your avatar is there.
That's a nice one.
I don't know what happened. I haven't been able to to put the screen again.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, it's okay. You can ask it if you want.
Yeah, you can ask.
No, I just want to see and know a little bit more of your practice, your daily practice. How is it, and how do you prefer, like, how do you do in the mornings, do you in the afternoons, or what do you do your insights on?
Well, I grew up as a Tibetan in India, and then from a young age, from age 11, I became a monk. So I've been monk. I was monk for over 20 years. So a lot of my practice habits were acquired as a monk. But in my own daily life, I generally do my practice in the morning. I get up quite early, around 6:30, have an early breakfast, and then have half an hour, sometimes up to an hour of quiet sitting practice. So it starts with setting your intention, and then I have a daily practice that is very Buddhist, like kind of, taking refuge in the three jewels and reaffirming my bodhicitta and compassion kind of, precepts. And then I have a guru yoga meditation that involves visualization of Tsongkhapa, who's one of the major figures in the Tibetan tradition. As making an emotional connection with him. And then I do a little bit of sadhana practice, which is part of the Tibetan tradition. And then I end with the reaffirmation of my intention for the day. And then before going to bed, I take another 10 minutes to quickly review the day, just to see not so much scorekeeping, but just checking the synergy of the early morning spirit and the reality of that day, so that I can round up the day. So that's my practice. And then the real practice is the day itself, when I can show up into the world in a way that I would like to show up. So that's the whole point of, and in fact, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who does at least 4 or 5 hours of morning meditation, he says that his morning practice is like recharging the battery. And the purpose of that is to use it during the daytime.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that for me, that if I don't have my morning practice, that it really throws off my day, that I'm not as balanced throughout the day. It's wonderful to hear about all that you do, so that you're able to be this beam of light in this world. And I know that with the Compassion Institute, one thing that you teach is how to integrate compassion into our daily practice. And I'm wondering if you could share 1 or 2 insights from that we could take moving forward to integrate compassion into our day, even in the situation where we're in now.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that, at the Compassion Institute, what we, sort of emphasize is the recognition that compassion is a very natural human impulse. Compassion as a quality is not something that we have to cultivate. We have it naturally. But what we need to do is to make it more intentional, because we have the best intention, but we're not able to bring it into our everyday action. So some training is helpful to make compassion more intentional. That's one thing. And the second thing is to really kind of exercise our empathy, and particularly invoking the shared common humanity with everybody, so that we can establish that connection. Because empathy and compassion will arise if you are able to identify with the other person, if you are able to feel the connection. And generally, we don't feel the connection with a stranger unless the stranger is screaming and it's pain. And then the acute suffering is such a powerful connector, because we know what it feels like. We immediately cut through all the barriers. But normally, we don't extend that. Now, in order to do that, recognizing common humanity, not just intellectually, but actually viscerally, is a powerful practice. So this is where the training really helps. So one simple thing that we invite people to do is in the morning, set your intention. And then as you begin your day, set the intention so that as much as possible, you will bring compassion as part of your equation. So when you are confronted with a challenge, even with someone close to you in your interaction, if you make, you have a choice what particular type of motivation system that you might want to tap into. we can tap into a motivation that has to do with threat detection, fear, anger, or we may tap into a motivation system that has to do with about kind of, ambition, craving, acquisition, or you may tap into a motivation system that has to do with nurturing, connecting, and caring. And so that is it may be very short time, but we do have a choice. So if we can train ourselves so that our default response initially will come from that place of compassion and empathy. If the situation calls for then another response, then that's fine. But our initial response, if we can come from that place, then everything changes. And so this is really the key to the idea behind compassion training.
Yeah. And I think, what I was understanding as you were speaking about that is that we do that so that our minds can be most peaceful. Would you say that that's right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Because a lot of the, once we take out the challenges that have to do with immediate needs like our shelter, food, and all the rest, then if you look at our everyday, a large part of our experience of pain and happiness, suffering and happiness, really has to do with interaction with others. The quality of relationship that we have with others, or engagement that we have with others. So there, if we bring compassion, then the chances are that we are going to feel much more happy. Partly because the moment you choose compassion, you choose opening your heart, and you choose to give the benefit of the doubt to the other person. And that creates a sort of a basis that is actually quite courageous, because you're opening your heart. And this is why His Holiness says that the source of compassion is really courage. Because when you choose to be compassionate, you're basically saying, I don't have a self-agenda here. And when you don't have a self-agenda, and when you recognize that, then there is a kind of a freedom. And that's why truly compassionate people are also quite happy people. There's a kind of a deep sense of relaxedness about them, because there's no heaviness that comes with the self-agenda. So that's why I think choosing compassion can be quite liberating, actually.
I know we don't have a lot of time with you, but how much longer? I know we have some more questions. I don't know what you want to get to, Jordana.
No, I think we can go on for.
Okay, all right. Then just let us know. Let us know. We want to respect your time.
Yeah, we have a few questions from the audience. I think Rivka, this one ties in really nicely to what Jinpa La was just speaking about. If I'm going to unmute you to ask your question. You're not unmuted yet. Looks like you need to unmute.
There you go.
Yeah.
Does that work? Okay, hi.
Yes, hi Rivka, in Florida.
Hi. I'm in Florida, and when they just crazily open the beaches. So this question is because after I did my practice this morning, I looked out the balcony and all these people were congregating. So the question that I have here is, how does one keep up gratitude? We are seeing many people protest what we need to do for the collective good. There are many out there who are just seem so ego-driven and selfish and undermining what we need to do collectively. I feel sad and frustrated when I see them protesting and they're here. Read their virulent and angry posts. I know the economic impact is devastating, but what they're doing is putting so many people and healthcare workers at risk here in Florida, especially. It's been just the last few days sort of crazy.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, this is also quite painful for me to watch from here as well. And this is one area where I wish the national leaders can really set the right tone. This is, I don't know if any of you have watched British Queen's speech, a few weeks ago. I think about 2 weeks ago, she gave a national speech. And she set the right tone. And that's what in a good leader, a national leader would do that. Because, in moments of crisis, citizens need to look up to the leader, to set the tone, set the example, embody what the citizens need to do. So, and this is why I think it's painful for us to, even from outside the US, to see this. But the good thing about United States is it's a federal system. So which means the local governors and the states have quite a lot of power and authority. So so I think the saner heads will prevail, and I just hope that this protest movement doesn't pick up in a critical mass. If it picks up critical mass, then we are talking about real trouble. But if it is a small handful of people, because people are very different. So, and a lot of people, until it strikes home, for them, virus is just out there. It's someone else's problem, and the economic pain they experience is real, and the pandemic is something that is abstract. So I hope that this protest will just be a minority. It will be probably. I think the crisis itself will reveal and sort of reveal to them this is something that
that's their lesson to learn.
Yeah.
Well, can I just piggyback? I guess my question to fine tune on that is like, how do you reconcile? We're supposed to be coming from this place of compassion. They're so angry, and when I attempt to even converse, we have some of them in my condo building actually who are protesting. I try to come from a place of empathy, compassion, and oh my gosh.
Yes.
The anger that comes from them is so much. It just sucks the life out of me,
So I think, compassion also reminds us that there are sometimes situations where you cannot do anything. And also you have to acknowledge that they have their own point of view. And whatever that is coming from, you have to recognize that they have their own point of view. So I think I don't think compassion gives us all the answers, but I think just being able to share with them what you think is the right thing to do, and if they don't take it, then we just have to leave it there. I don't think we're going to be able to solve the problem.
Thank you. Yeah, that was great. We have a question from Carrie, I know in Montreal. You could unmute yourself or unmute her, Jordana. There you go. What's your question, Carrie?
First of all, Jinpa, thank you so much for your calmness, as well as your underlying the compassion that a crisis can bring out in people, because of course a lot of people are worried about the basics, about their homes, about their jobs, about taking care of their families, and about their elderly. So thank you so much for that. I'm an educator, and of course I live in Montreal, so you must be familiar with the fact that all our schools are closed and our children are faced with a crisis that certainly in my life we never had to deal with. What advice would you have for parents and educators to help our children deal with the stress and anxiety and the fears that they have to live with going through these times?
Thank you. That's actually my wife. She teaches social emotional learning, she and her colleagues. So they have been actually running a small kind of a Zoom meeting with parents and sometimes children and parents together. So, I really feel for the parents who have school-going children at home, because it's a real challenge. I was telling some of my friends who have still school-going children that the first few days may have been a bit of a joy, because you get so much time to spend with your kids. But then when the reality kicks in, then it's day in and day out. And then I told some of them that it's very important to really set the boundaries, have clarity, because you are now sharing the space. And children cannot be confined just to their own bedrooms. There is a public space, which is the kitchen and the dining space. And then the adults cannot take over the public space, pretending that their work, parents' work, is more important than the children's schoolwork. So because this is the prolonged lockdown, is a strange period where the children cannot go and play outside, at will. So in which case, parents really have to learn to share the space they have with the children so that, and then create, there's no physical space, but you can create emotional space. So this is where the communal living becomes important. And this is one area where in the West, we are not very good because we are a very individual kind of society. Whereas in Asia, because of the extended family and the monasteries and everywhere, people tend, there's much less physical space and privacy, but we learn to give emotional privacy and space. So I think the parents, I think if this, I do not foresee the school being reopened before the end of the school season. I don't see it coming. So which means you have another over a month, roughly a month to still be in this position. So then it's very important to create that emotional space so that children don't feel they're being nagged all the time. So I think this is one area where parents are smart parenting. And this is, by bringing more conscious intention and actually being clear with the kids, and so that, and of course, as parents, we will worry about screen time and all the rest, but a lot of those rules are out of the window now because class is coming through the screen. So, you can do something with your server kind of, the devices, whatever. But I think this is one area where the smart parenting becomes helpful. And for the children, I mean, if they're very small, they probably will be protected by their innocence. But if the children are, old enough to be able to listen to the news, then parents sitting down and sharing with them what the situation is in a proportionate way so that they don't freak out, I think is helpful. So other than that, I really don't have, and I've my own two girls are, one is second year at University at McGill, one just finished. So, and they're, so I don't need to worry, but I really feel for, parents who have school-going children. It must be so tough. It must be really so tough.
We thank you so much for that. And we have one last question. And then, by the way, as we wrap things up, we're just going to go through some of our programming and end it with a beautiful guided meditation by Georgiana. But before we leave you, I know Ash had a question that I thought was a really great way to wrap up this conversation. Ash, there you go.
Hey, I'm here. Hello, sir. Thank you so much for doing this. It really means a lot. I'm really learning a lot from this. My question for you is, how do you define mindfulness versus being mindful?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, mindfulness, you can look at mindfulness as a state and as well as practice. So generally, it's better to look at it as form of a practice because state is tricky, because then you get attached to the outcome. If you look at mindfulness as a practice, then you deliberately choose to quieten your mind and be aware of whatever's happening in the present moment without judgment. So this is the modern contemporary kind of definition of mindfulness. And being mindful is more like bringing awareness into a situation because, and with some conscious attention. So, and awareness, the mindfulness practice, one of the aims of mindfulness practice is to increase our self-awareness. Now, self-awareness, we cannot will it. Self-awareness has to arise. But the only way in which self-awareness can arise is if we can combine intention and conscious paying of attention. So through these two, combination of these two, when we practice it on a more regular basis, then the next time when there is a situation that challenges us, we bring awareness to the situation. And once we bring awareness to the situation, then at least in principle, we have some degree of choice in that. Normally we react, sort of, emotionally react. But if we're able to bring awareness, and then what comes in the form of your action, you can decide, you can determine. So that's why mindfulness as a practice is really powerful.
Wow, Jinpa, thank you so much. That's amazing to even just, I could visualize it as you were speaking, you know, bringing the, you know, mindfulness, just, it comes into our way of being when we do the practice. When we aspire to get to that state, we are in the practice of being mindful and bringing awareness, that we have that ability to respond to our environment versus that immediate reaction.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Before there's a Marty. I just wanted to say hi to Marty. Hi,
I
Marty.
love that. That's the point. This is like a family.
Yes. And I can see you have your sort of, you know, quarantine, self-isolation period of beard. And look at my hair. I haven't
You too could do this.
had a chance to cut my hair for over a month now.
Same with mine. This is 30 days worth.
Wow.
Great to see you.
I love that. And thank you, Marty, for joining us as well for this new family that we're creating. Yeah, we want to thank Jinpa so much for your time, your energy, your love, and your light, and ultimately your compassion, and creating a space for us to take it all in and to create a community here and extend your community to us today. So we so appreciate that.
Thank you. And thank you, Natalie, for
yes, I want to.
Yeah.
Yes, Natalie is one of our facilitators, and she's about to talk about one of her classes. But Natalie has been amazing. I actually met Natalie on a really incredible trip in Israel, where we originally connected, and it brought us here. We would have never known.
Thank you. And for those of you who are interested, my own Compassion Institute offers twice a week group sessions through Zoom webinar. If you go to the compassioninstitute.com, you will be able to register for these classes. These are free online 45 minutes class. I do the one on Friday regularly, but there's another one which a colleague of mine does. And those who can't register, it's also now being webcast live on Facebook on the Compassion Institute's page. So it's a way of trying to create a kind of a community. Yeah.
No, we love that. And we included it in the comments, compassioninstitute.com for anyone, because we want just to share resources here as well. And
we'll send that out in an email to all of you afterwards. Make sure that you guys know that you can take classes twice a week at Compassion Institute and on Fridays with Jinpa.
Okay.
Thank you. Stay safe and stay healthy.